I think this passage from the Daily Stoic will really help a lot of people. Be the person you want to be. First tell yourself, what kind of person do you want to be? Then do what you have to do. For in nearly every pursuit, we see this to be the case. Those in athletic pursuit first choose the sport they want, then they do the work. An archer is highly unlikely to hit a target she did not aim for. The same goes for you. Whatever your target, you are certain to miss the target if you do not bother to draw back and fire. Our perceptions, our principles guide us in selection of what we want, but ultimately our actions determine whether we get there or not. So yes, spend some time, real, uninterrupted time, thinking about what's important to you, what are your priorities, then work toward that and forsake all others. It's not enough to wish and hope. One must act and act right. Because knowledge is only potential power. The power comes through the actions that we take. It is a time for many of us to have complete reset of what are we going to do, how are we going to get there, and also just refocus on our own personal development, our own skill acquisition, and our reignition of all those things that make it important. So if you're new here, my name is Vaughn Littlejohns. I'm an educational leader. I focus on empowering other teachers, leaders to leverage their time, leverage their technology to make more impact in education. And one way I do that is through coaching, through mentoring, and through training others in the systems that I've built over the last 10 years in educational leadership. So today I really want to just have a bit of a reflection on the week ahead and just discuss some of the things and strategies that I've used to actually identify what do I want, how do I want to get there, and what is the actions I'm going to take. So ever since I was an early career teacher, I wanted to go and teach overseas, but I had no idea on how to do it. Where to go, how to get started. I felt like I needed to have X amount of years of experience before I could even attempt to go and learn a completely new curriculum, a completely new system. And those beliefs held me back, but they didn't hold me back in a way that I stopped progressing in my own career. I found that I just dived heavily into educational leadership, and I became a head teacher within 3 years and a deputy principal a few years after that. And that's my current role at the moment. But the crazy thing is, in the next few months, I'm actually going to become a director of technology in an international setting. So super exciting, super grateful for that opportunity. But it took me 10 years to realize this, that our journey of what we want, you need to focus on it. And just like the quote from the Daily Stoic, that is, if an archer shoots an arrow and they're not looking at that target, they're not going to hit it. Now, I had the idea of I wanted to go international, but I didn't know what I was aiming at. What specific role, what specific target was I going to shoot my shot at? So if you're in a position where you're at a crossroads in life and it comes down to your personal life or your professional life and you don't know which direction to take, there's a really pretty simple system that we can implement to actually make that work. So a couple of questions we need to ask ourselves is, what do I really want? And then we go into, well, for me, I wanted to have more impact. I wanted to travel. I wanted to go and see these things. But I didn't want to go into another deputy principal role out west or a principal role out west. For those who don't know, I'm on a fast track to school principal. That's my current position. And the federal funding was cut for that role. I was promised 10 years, I only got 4, so I had to find a new job. But if you're in a similar position where now your hand has been forced, where do we go? How do we get there? You can have this quick reflection for yourself and you can write it down first. You can talk to a coach. You can articulate what is really the thing that you want. Now, there's a really great book, Simon Sinek, Start With Why. Now, if you haven't heard that, it's a bit of a business book. However, the principle is we start from our inner circle of why. That is our driving force. And when we come to strategic leadership, that is our vision. That is the thing that is driving our way forward. So when we come to whole school planning, for example, strategic planning, it's a 4-year plan. We have our why are we doing this thing? Otherwise, there's no point. But I was recently talking with a coach and he actually said there's 2 breakdowns to why. So we basically can split why into 2 components. The why is 2 people. First, it has to be you. Why are you doing the thing that you want to do? Now, in Australia, we have this tall poppy syndrome. Whether you're ambitious and you're aiming to get a new job and career and climb the ranks, you want to get more money, all those kind of things, that status symbol. As soon as you start saying you want to do those things, people will start cutting you down, or you'll cut yourself down because it is a culturally ingrained problem. However, if you compare that to the American people and the American culture, they're very good at bravado, at promotion of their own self-worth. So first component of our why is us as a person. Now, that is really, what do we want? How do we want to live? What do we want to earn? What impact do we want to make? And being very specific on that. When I was in university, I was going through my first degree and I hated it. It was economics and business. I thought, yeah, look, I loved this at school and now I'm going to do this full time and become an international businessman. Genuinely hated the course. So I moved over to teaching. But I was considering, well, how much am I going to make? What are the benefits going to be? All those kind of things, and putting myself first. But it took me another 6 years to graduate, just at a bachelor's degree. And I said, never again. I'm never doing uni again. And then find myself about 6 years later doing a Master's of Educational Leadership. But that's another story. So the first component we have to do when we're looking at our inner circle of why is us. What do we want? How much do we want to earn? What impact do we want to make? And the more clear we are on those targets, the easier it is. So if you come back to my current situation, for example, and I had the fork in the road, do I go become a deputy principal in the West, go to Sydney, become a principal, what that path, or do I go into the international space and explore? So one of the questions I had was, what will make the better story? And if you are sitting back, you don't want to have a regret that you've made this decision, and because there's another simple framework we can layer on top of that. Is this a one-way door, meaning as soon as you walk through it, you can't come back? Or is it a revolving door, meaning you can go through, you can test it out, and then you can come back around if you don't really like it? Well, really, most decisions that we make are revolving. We just feel like they are permanent, and we have to make this exactly right, otherwise our entire life is going to end. Now, I was coaching someone a few months ago and they were at a fork in the road. They were determined, do I go through a business track or do I become an electrician? Which one do I go? Do I become a musician and run a music business, or do I go electrician? Now, the safe bet is become electrician. Stable income if you are working for another company, or you start your own business that way because it's usually a higher income from comparative to, say, a music industry. However, what was the driving purpose? What was the why? The why do I want to do this? What do you get fulfilled from? Is it the achievement of actually, hey, look, I'm earning X amount of money? Or is it the fulfillment that, yes, I'm contributing and I'm making some sort of impact? Now, for many educators, it is all about the sense of fulfillment. That's why we go and teach. That's why we share our knowledge. We learn something and we go and distribute that to others. Now, that's really important to acknowledge, because if we don't understand what are we driving for, we can always try to drive for the next sense of achievement and the next one and the next one and the next one. And if you have ever achieved anything, what do you think happens when we achieve that goal? You've achieved that milestone. You're earning 100 grand a year, or you have got that promotion. How long do you actually feel good for? It's usually think about it. It's usually only a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month. But your brain starts kicking into gear of what's next? What's next? And we're always looking for the next hurdle, the next milestone. And if we don't have one lined up next, then we can get into this cycle of, I'm not enough, I haven't earned enough, I'm going to keep driving and keep grinding. So when we first come back to the reason we are on this path, look at what do we want, what is the impact, what are we going to get fulfilled from? But the other component of the why, when we look at Simon Sinek's model, is it's technically a who. Who is the other person we want to serve? Because ultimately we are serving our own self-interest, but we have to serve somebody else's. And for many educators, it's a student, and it can be a kid, it could be an adult, it doesn't really matter, it's a student. That is the other person. And if you look at any business, it's the same thing. They are serving somebody else as well as themselves. So the why is in between that, basically a Venn diagram. So when we're looking at a path and splitting between two options, is it a revolving door? Can we come back through it and just go again in a different direction? Or do we have to make this and stick in it for a few years? Now, realistically, we don't ever have to sort of stick to a decision, but I like to use Steven Covey's framework, that is, how do we build influence and relational trust? Now, if you don't know what relational trust means, it's the ability to relate to someone, build trust, credibility really quickly. Now, there's 4 pillars to that. First, we need to have some sort of compassion. We need to have compassion for others, seek first to understand their situation if we're serving somebody else. So for example, a student came into my office first week back, said, "Sir, if you don't sort out this, I'm going to go and punch this other person in the head." So, well, all right, let's have a chat. We'll just talk about this. Seek to understand what is the situation, and then figure out, well, they weren't the actual real problem. Something bigger was going on. But we could spend a bit of time through a bit of empathetic listening and understand what is the real problem for you. But the next component of Steven Covey's framework is you need to have competence. And that is basically, people are looking at you, can you do what you've promised you can do? So if you're going into a new job, you're starting a new business, you're doing something, can you do what you said you're going to do? Now, for many of you, you might know that I'm a coach. I coach people in education, leadership, and just personal lives. And for me, to make sure people knew I was competent at the thing, I've just gone through an intensive 6-month accreditation program, and actually as of yesterday, I'm a fully certified EMCC coach at a proficient level and practitioner level. So that means that 100 hours of coaching that I've delivered to 10 plus clients, and the 6-month accreditation program through Growth Coaching International means I am certified as a educational coach, leadership coach, growth coach, and now I can show competence in that field. But before, people can just snarl at coaching. They can go, "What's that? It's to do with PT?" I'm like, no. There's all sorts of business coaches. There's everything. But there's usually a bad flavor of the month because there's so much stigma because people haven't showed competence. So the second component of that, building relational trust, is your competence. So compassion for others, seeking to understand what is their problem, not yours, showing you're competent in doing the thing that you've promised. The third component is consistency. How do you show up every day? How do you show up in person and online? Now, for many of us, if we are doing social media, it's such a challenge to show up consistently when you're working full time. Now, there's other ways of doing that, but for me personally, it's such a challenge. I work 10 plus hours a day, work on a bit of business stuff, try to do social media, but regardless of the excuses, the path that I've chosen is the path that I'm on. So consistency is how we build trust a lot easier. If you have in education, and for example, you greet a student by name every day for a week, and they get used to that. And then soon as you do not greet that person by name, you'll notice a bit of a shift in body language. You'll notice that student, are they upset with me? Are they pissed with me? You can do that in relationships too, with your partner. If you say hello, you greet them with a smile and a kiss every day, and then the next day you basically just ghost them, you don't talk to them, they will think you're inconsistent with your person, something is wrong. And trust is then severed because you don't know how to read that person. So that brings me to the last of these 4 C's framework from Steven Covey, all about relational trust. And that's our ability to communicate. Now, most people believe that communication is verbal. That is our primary form of communication. Well, you'd actually be wrong. Most of our communication in the way we build relationships is coming from our actual physiology, the way we use our body, the way we can mirror body language. So if you notice that one of the strategies that we use when we've got, say, an escalated person, meaning they're really upset, they're really angry, or they're stressed out, is to actually go for a walk side by side with them, and we get into sync. And what does that naturally do? That means we are shoulder to shoulder on this issue. We can deal with this together. You're not in this alone. And that natural movement, that natural mirroring, is actually how we form a connection a lot quicker than just the words that we use. So that's why sometimes you'll notice in social media world, it is so much more challenging to build connection with the person that you're watching, because you're not necessarily mirroring what they are doing. You're not necessarily resonating with the body language that is being used. But regardless, there is about 70% comes from our body language and the communication that we use from our gestures, our hand gestures, our tonality of what we're doing, the facial cues. The next comes from basically the way we can use our voice, our tone, and all those kind of things. Now, there's other components to building communication skills, but if we focus on one of them, just focusing on mirroring and matching, our body language can drastically improve our ability to relate and build relational trust with others. So that is Steven Covey's framework for building relational trust. Now, that is really top of mind for me right now, coming back to that concept before about aiming at our target and making sure that if we've got this thing in mind that we want to achieve, how do we get there? Well, we aim at it and we have a clear strategy on what we're going to do. Now, for me, I've only got about 5 weeks left in my current role. So there's a concept I was talking to a coach about, and that is about leaving well and arriving well. How does that work? Is don't burn your bridges and build that relational trust as quickly as you can to build that network and to build that social capital. Because if people don't trust you, people aren't going to work well with you, and obviously that can determine how much you enjoy an experience or not. So I just wanted to really quickly sum up that if we are looking at aiming at a specific target, we need to have clarity in mind. What is the why? We're starting with that centerpiece, and we are doing that for 2 reasons. The 2 who's: who, us, how is it going to affect us, and the other person, who's it going to serve us doing this thing. Once we're clear on that, it makes it a lot easier for us to actually make decision and then go forward. When we're looking at actually serving those people, once we actually have made a decision on what is the thing that we're aiming at, then we can employ Steven Covey's 4 C's of relational trust: communication, consistency, competence, and compassion. Have those 4, and it is so much easier for us to build connection with others and actually build the life that we want. Because for me, it's now been 10 years of education. I've just got the accreditation for coaching, so I can start coaching more and more people one-on-one and go through that mentoring model, that coaching model in educational leadership, educational success. Doesn't really matter, but it's in that space, and I'm super excited. But it's something I had to aim at very, very specifically so I can hit that goal. Because if you don't, you'll flounder around like I did for my first 6 years of my bachelor's degree, because I didn't really know why I was doing what I was doing. So I hope this helps. Remember, effort equals results. Think deeply on what you want and why, and you actually address and hit that target that you're aiming at, as long as you put that effort in, and the result will come. I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you want any coaching, feel free. I'll put a link down below where you can reach out through Instagram or LinkedIn. See you in the next one.